The alarm screamed through the bridge of the USS Defiant. Captain Jake Morrison jumped from his chair and ran to the communications panel. The sound meant only one thing. Someone was sending a distress call. "What do we have, Beth?" Morrison asked the communications officer. Beth Turner's face was pale as she listened to her headset. "It's coming from the Calith system, sir. Multiple ships sending emergency signals." Morrison knew about the Calith. They were a peaceful people who spent their time trading goods between different worlds. They had never hurt anyone. They built beautiful cities and made art that people across the galaxy loved. "Put it on speaker," Morrison ordered. The bridge filled with desperate voices speaking in the Calith language. Beth quickly worked to translate the words. What they heard made everyone freeze. "Please, anyone who can hear this. The Void Hunters have come. Our cities are burning. Our ships are being destroyed. We have maybe 2 hours before our world dies. Please help us." The message repeated over and over. Each time it got weaker. Each time there was more fear in the voice. Morrison felt his stomach drop. Everyone in the galaxy knew about the Void Hunters. They were monsters that traveled from world to world, eating everything in their path. No one had ever stopped them. No one had even tried to fight them, and lived to tell about it. "Sir," said First Officer Danny Clark, "we should report this to Galactic Command and continue our patrol." Morrison looked at his crew. There were only 200 people on the Defiant. It was a small ship compared to the giant vessels that most species used. The humans were still new to space travel. Most alien races saw them as children playing with dangerous toys. "How far are we from the Calith system?" Morrison asked. Navigator Lisa Hayes checked her instruments. 3 hours at maximum speed, sir. "The Galactic Council will handle this," Clark said. "We're just a patrol ship." Morrison walked to the front window of the bridge. He could see the stars scattered across the darkness of space. Somewhere out there, people were dying while monsters destroyed their world. The Galactic Council would send ships, but not for days. By then, there would be nothing left to save. "Lisa, set course for the Calith system," Morrison said. Clark stepped forward. "Sir, with respect, we can't fight the Void Hunters. Our weapons are too weak. Our ship is too small." Chief Engineer Ryan Brooks spoke from his station. "The captain's right, Danny. We can't fight them head on. But we might be able to help people escape." Science Officer Amanda Price was all ready, working at her computer. "I'm pulling up everything we know about the Void Hunters. Maybe we can find a weakness." Morrison sat back down in his captain's chair. "Beth, send a message to Galactic Command. Tell them we're responding to the distress call. Ryan, I want maximum speed to the Calith system." The ship's engines roared louder as Ryan pushed them to their limits. The Defiant shot forward through space, racing toward a world that was dying. Amanda looked up from her computer screen. "Captain, the information about the Void Hunters is scary. They don't just attack worlds. They eat them. Their ships are alive. They consume everything, the land, the water, the air. When they're done, there's nothing left but a dead rock floating in space." "How many worlds have they destroyed?" Morrison asked. "In the last year alone? 47 worlds. Billions of people dead." The bridge became quiet. Everyone knew they were flying toward certain death. But Morrison also knew they couldn't just fly away and let the Caliph die. "Sir," Beth said, "I'm getting more messages from the Calith system. They're begging for help. They say they can see the Void Hunter ships in their sky." Morrison closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, his voice was firm. "We're going to help them. I don't know how, but we're going to try. Dr. Kate." Sullivan's voice came over the ship's communication system from the medical bay. "Captain, I'm preparing the medical bay for refugees. If we're going to save people, I want to be ready. Weapons Officer Carlos Martinez checked his weapon systems. Our guns are working perfectly, sir. They might not be strong enough to hurt the big ships, but we can defend ourselves against smaller targets. Lisa Hayes called out from her station. We'll reach the Caliph system in 2 hours and 30 minutes. Morrison looked around at his crew. They were scared, but they were ready to fight. These were humans, people who had learned to survive by working together and never giving up. Maybe they were smaller than other species. Maybe their technology wasn't the best. But they had something that many other races had lost, the willingness to help others, even when it seemed impossible. Listen up, everyone, Morrison said. We're about to face something that has destroyed 47 worlds. But we're also about to show the galaxy what humans can do when innocent people need help. Stay sharp, stay brave, and remember, we're not just fighting for the Caliph. We're fighting to prove that sometimes the smallest ship can make the biggest difference. The Defiant flew through space toward a battle that no one thought they could win. The Defiant dropped out of hyperspace, and everyone on the bridge gasped. The sight before them was worse than any nightmare. The Caliph homeworld was being eaten alive. Massive creatures floated in space around the planet. They looked like giant sea monsters mixed with machines. Each one was as big as a moon. Long tentacles reached down from their bodies and dug into the planet's surface like hungry mouths. My God, whispered Lisa Hayes. Those things are huge. Captain Morrison watched in horror as one of the creatures pulled up an entire mountain and swallowed it. Where beautiful cities used to stand, there were now giant holes in the ground. The blue oceans were turning black as the monsters drank them dry. Captain, Amanda Price said, her voice shaking, I'm reading dozens of smaller ships around the big ones. They're hunting down the escape pods. Morrison could see them now. Smaller versions of the big monsters, each one still bigger. Then the Defiant were chasing down tiny Caliph ships. When they caught them, the small ships would disappear into the creatures' mouths. There, Danny Clark pointed to the right side of the planet, a group of civilian ships trying to escape. Morrison saw them, maybe 20 small Caliph vessels, running from 3 of the smaller hunter creatures. The Caliph ships were slow and had no weapons. They wouldn't last 5 minutes. Carlos, target those hunters. Lisa, get us between them and the civilians. Sir, Clark said, if we attack them, they'll call for help. We'll have every monster in the system coming after us. Morrison gripped his chair. Then we better be fast. Carlos, fire everything we have. The Defiant shot forward toward the hunting creatures. Carlos Martinez fired the ship's weapons. Bright beams of energy struck one of the hunters. The creature screamed, a sound that came through space itself and made everyone on the bridge feel sick. The hunter spun around to face them. Its body was covered in what looked like armor made from bones. Its eyes were huge and black. When it opened its mouth, Morrison could see rows of teeth that seemed to go on forever. It's coming right at us, Lisa shouted. Good, Morrison said. That means it's not chasing the civilians. Keep firing, Carlos. The Defiant and the hunter creature danced through space, shooting at each other. The human ship was much faster, but the creature's weapons were stronger. Every time it hit them, the whole ship shook. Hull damage on Deck 5, Ryan Brooks called out from engineering. But we're still in one piece. Carlos landed another hit on the creature. This time, something strange happened. The other 2 hunters suddenly stopped chasing the Caliph ships and turned toward the Defiant. They're working together, Amanda said. When we hurt one, the others respond. Morrison realized something important. They're connected somehow, like a hive mind. The 3 hunters were now coming at them from different directions. Morrison knew they couldn't fight all 3 at once. Beth, send a message to those Caliph ships. Tell them to run while the hunters are busy with us. Message sent, sir. The Defiant twisted and turned through space, trying to avoid the three hunters. But there were too many of them. One of the creatures grabbed the ship with a long tentacle. We're caught, Lisa said. Ryan Brooks worked frantically at his controls. I'm reversing the engine flow. Hold on, everyone. The ship's engine suddenly pushed forward instead of backward. The Defiant shot toward the hunter that was holding them. The creature didn't expect this and loosened its grip. The ship broke free. Nice work, Ryan, Morrison said, but their victory was short. More hunters were coming from around the planet. Soon they would be surrounded. Captain, Dr. Sullivan's voice came over the communication system. We've rescued 53 Calith refugees. They're badly hurt, but they're alive. Morrison smiled. At least they had saved some people. But now they needed to save themselves. Amanda, what did you learn from fighting these things? Amanda was studying her computer readings. Something very important, sir. When Carlos hit the first hunter, all three of them reacted at exactly the same time. They don't just work together. They share the same mind. What does that mean for us? If they all share one mind, then they probably can't think like individuals. They expect their enemies to act as a group too. Morrison understood. Most alien species in the galaxy worked as teams. They made decisions together and moved together. But humans were different. Humans could act alone. Humans could make crazy decisions that didn't make sense to anyone else. I have an idea, Morrison said, but it's going to sound insane. 6 hunters were now surrounding them. Each one was 10 times bigger than the Defiant. Their weapons were charged and ready to fire. Whatever. Your idea is, sir, Danny Clark said. Now would be a good time. Morrison stood up. Ryan, I want you to aim us directly at the biggest hunter. Lisa, when I give the word, turn us 90 degrees to the left. Carlos, fire everything at the hunter on our right. Amanda, send a distress signal toward the hunters. On our left. Sir, Clark said, that makes no sense. We're attacking in 4 different directions at once. Morrison grinned. Exactly. These creatures think as one mind. They can't understand an enemy that does 4 different things at the same time. Ready? Now. The Defiant shot toward the biggest hunter while firing at a different hunter while sending signals to a third group. The hunters paused. Their shared mind couldn't process what was happening. In that moment of confusion, the Defiant escaped through the gap between 2 hunters. It worked, Lisa shouted. We're clear. But Morrison knew they had only bought themselves time. The hunters would figure out what happened and come after them again. And next time, there would be more of them. Set course for the asteroid field near the 4th moon, Morrison ordered. We need somewhere to hide and think. As the Defiant flew away from the dying planet, Morrison looked back at the giant creatures that were destroying an entire world. Somewhere in that nightmare, there had to be a weakness. Humans had always been good at finding weaknesses in things that seemed impossible to beat. He just hoped they would live long enough to find it. The Defiant hid behind a large asteroid, its engines quiet. Through the ship's windows, they could still see the Void Hunters eating the Calith homeworld. The beautiful blue planet was now mostly black and gray. Captain Morrison sat in the meeting room with his senior officers. Dr. Kate Sullivan had just finished treating the Calith refugees they had rescued. Now it was time to figure out what they had learned. Tell me about the connection between these creatures, Morrison said to Amanda Price. Amanda pulled up her readings on the table's screen. It's like they all share one brain, sir. When Carlos shot the first hunter, the others knew about it instantly. They don't need to talk to each other or send signals. They just know. That's how they hunt so well, Dr. Sullivan added. I've been talking to the Calith refugees. They say the Void Hunters always know exactly where to strike. They never waste time or make mistakes. Morrison thought about this. So they're perfect hunters, because they think as one mind. Yes, sir, Amanda said. But I think that might also be their weakness. Danny Clark leaned forward. How can perfect teamwork be a weakness? Amanda smiled. Because they can only understand enemies who also think as a team. When we did 4 different things at once back there, they froze. Their shared mind couldn't process it. Carlos Martinez nodded. That's right. In all my weapons training, they taught us that most alien species plan their attacks together. Everyone knows what everyone else is doing. But humans don't work that way, Morrison said, understanding where this was going. Exactly, Amanda said. Humans make individual decisions. Sometimes those decisions don't make sense to other people. Sometimes humans do crazy things that surprise everyone. Dr. Sullivan had been quiet, but now she spoke up. There's something else. Beth has been listening to the signals between the Void Hunters. She asked me to help translate what she found. Beth Turner joined them and played a recording. Strange. Sounds filled the room, like whales singing, but darker and more frightening. At first we thought it was just random noise, Beth said. But Dr. Sullivan helped me figure out it's actually their language. And Captain, you're not going to believe what they're saying. Tell me. Dr. Sullivan spoke carefully. They're not from this galaxy, sir. They came here from somewhere else, and they're running from something. Morrison felt a chill. Running from what? They call it the silence, Beth said. From what we can understand, it destroyed their entire galaxy. These creatures aren't just hunters. They're refugees. They eat worlds because they need energy to keep running. How long have they been running? Danny asked. Amanda checked her computer. Based on their signals, maybe millions of years. Morrison stood up and walked to the window. Outside, he could see the massive creatures still feeding on the Caliph world. So they're afraid of something too. Yes, sir, Dr. Sullivan said. But that doesn't make them any less dangerous. They've destroyed 47 worlds this year. They'll destroy more unless someone stops them. The question is how, Carlos said. We barely survived fighting 3 of the small ones. There are dozens around that planet, plus the giant ones. Ryan Brooks had been listening from his engineering station. His voice came through the communication system. I might have an idea about that, Captain. Can you come down to engineering? Morrison and his officers went down to see what Ryan had discovered. The engineering section was full of humming machines and blinking lights. Ryan was standing next to a device that Morrison didn't recognize. I've been studying the readings from our fight with the hunters, Ryan said. Amanda was right about them sharing a mind. But I think I know how that mind works. Ryan pointed to his computer screen. It showed a pattern of lines and waves. Every time we hit one of them, this signal went out to all the others. It's like a neural network, a brain made up of many parts. Like how human brain cells work together? Dr. Sullivan asked. Exactly. But here's the interesting part. The signal is strongest between the small hunters and the big ones. I think the giant creatures are like the main brain, and the smaller ones are like arms and legs. Morrison began to understand. So if we could disrupt the signal between them, the small hunters would lose their connection, Ryan finished. They wouldn't know what to do without instructions from the big ones. Carlos got excited. We could fight them when they're confused. But how do we disrupt the signal? Danny asked Doc Ryan. Smiled and patted the device next to him. With this, it's our emergency beacon. Every ship has one. It sends out a distress signal that can reach across the galaxy. But I've been modifying it. What kind of modification? Morrison asked. Human. Brain waves, sir. I've been recording our neural patterns and programming them into the beacon. If we broadcast human thoughts at full power, it should create static in their network. Amanda's eyes got wide. That's brilliant. They'll hear individual thoughts instead of group thoughts. It will be like noise to them. Morrison felt hope for the first time since they arrived. How long will it take to get ready? The beacon is ready now, sir. But there's a problem. To disrupt their entire network, we need to get close to the biggest creature. And I mean really close. How close? Morrison asked. Ryan looked uncomfortable. We'd have to fly right up to it. Maybe even inside it. The room became quiet. Everyone knew what that meant. The biggest void hunter was larger than a moon. Getting that close would be suicide. There's something else, Meth said quietly. I intercepted another message. The void hunters are moving to their next target. Where? Morrison asked. New Geneva. Sir, it's a human colony world. 2 million people. Morrison felt his blood turn cold. New Geneva was where his brother lived with his family. It was a peaceful farming world where humans had built their first successful colony outside Earth's solar system. How long before they reached New Geneva? Morrison asked. Amanda checked her computer. At their current speed, 18 hours. Morrison looked around at his crew. They were all thinking the same thing. Somewhere out there, 2 million humans were about to die unless someone stopped the void hunters. Ryan, how long to set up your beacon? If we push it, maybe 6 hours. Do it, Morrison said. Danny, start planning an evacuation route for New Geneva. Carlos, I want our weapons ready for anything. Amanda, keep studying those creatures. There has to be something else we can use. As his crew got to work, Morrison stayed in engineering. With Ryan, he watched the young engineer work on the beacon that might save 2 million lives. Sir, Ryan said as he worked, there's one more thing about the beacon. When we broadcast human thoughts, it might affect our own minds too. I don't know what will happen to us. Morrison nodded. I understand. But we can't let New Geneva be destroyed. Ryan looked up from his work. Why are we doing this, sir? We're just one small ship. The galaxy has bigger fleets, stronger weapons. Morrison thought about the question. Because someone has to. And because humans don't give up when people need help. Ryan smiled and went back to work. Outside the asteroid field, the void hunters finished eating the Calith homeworld and began moving toward New Geneva. They had no idea that one small human ship was about to try something that had never been attempted before. Morrison just hoped it would be enough. The Defiant arrived at New Geneva just as the evacuation ships were lifting off from the planet's surface. Captain Morrison watched through the bridge windows as hundreds of civilian vessels fled toward space. But it wasn't enough. 2 million people lived on New Geneva, and the evacuation ships could only carry a few thousand at a time. The void hunters will be here in 4 hours, Amanda Price reported. The evacuation will take at least 10 hours to complete. Morrison felt sick. His brother Jake lived down there with his wife and 2 children. Somewhere in those crowded evacuation ships, his family was running for their lives. Sir, Danny Clark said, the colony governor is requesting assistance. They want us to help defend the evacuation. Morrison looked at his small ship. The Defiant had 20 weapons. The Void Hunter fleet had hundreds of creatures, each one bigger than anything humans had ever built. Tell the governor we'll do everything. We can, Morrison said. Ryan Brooks came onto the bridge carrying a small device. The beacon is ready, Captain. I've programmed it with brainwave patterns from our entire crew. When we activate it, it should broadcast human thoughts across a wide area. How wide? Morrison asked. Maybe 50,000 kilometers. Enough to disrupt the neural network of any void hunters in the area. Dr. Kate Sullivan joined them. I've been studying the effects this might have on us. When the beacon broadcasts our thoughts, we might experience confusion, headaches, or memory problems. In the worst case, some of us might pass out. Morrison nodded. How long can we run it? Maybe 10 minutes before the power drain becomes dangerous, Ryan said. Morrison thought about this. 10 minutes wasn't long enough to defeat the entire void hunter fleet, but it might be enough to save some of the evacuation ships. Captain, Beth Turner called out, I'm receiving a signal from the void hunter fleet. They've just entered the outer system. On the main screen, Morrison could see them. Dark shapes moving between the stars like shadows. The biggest creature was in the center, a monster so large it blocked out entire star fields behind it. Analysis. Amanda? Amanda studied her readings. The big one is definitely the primary brain, sir. All the smaller creatures are staying close to it. If we could disrupt that one, the whole fleet would lose coordination, Morrison finished. Tony Garcia, their pilot, spoke up. Sir, I've been thinking about what Ryan said. To disrupt the main creature, we need to get really close to it. What if we don't just get close? What if we go inside? Everyone on the bridge stared at him. Inside? Danny said. Tony, that thing would eat us. Maybe, Tony said. But look at the readings. The creature's body is mostly hollow inside. It's like a giant stomach with the brain in the center. If we could fly through its mouth and reach the brain directly, ... double quotes, Dr. Sullivan shook her head. That's insane. We don't know what's inside that thing. Morrison walked to the front of the bridge. Outside, he could see New Geneva, a green and blue world where humans had built farms and cities. His brother's family was down there somewhere. It is insane, Morrison said, but it might be the only way to save 2 million people. Carlos Martinez checked his weapon systems. Sir, if we're going inside that thing, I want every weapon we have ready to fire. How long until the Void Hunters reach New Geneva? Morrison asked. 3 hours and 40 minutes. Amanda said. Morrison made his decision. Danny, take half the crew and help coordinate the evacuation. Get as many people off the planet as possible. What about you, sir? Tony, Ryan, Carlos, Amanda, Dr. Sullivan, Beth and I are going to try something that's probably impossible. Danny stood up. Sir, I should stay with you. Morrison shook his head. Someone needs to make sure the evacuation continues if we don't make it back. That's you. As Danny left with half the crew, Morrison gathered the remaining officers around. Here's the plan, he said. We're going to fly directly at the main creature. Tony will pilot us through its mouth and into its body. Ryan will activate the beacon when we reach the brain. Carlos will be ready to fight anything we find inside. Amanda will guide us to the brain using her readings. Dr. Sullivan and Beth will monitor our health and communications. And if this doesn't work? Dr. Sullivan asked. Morrison looked around at his remaining crew. Then we'll have tried something no one else was brave enough to attempt. The Defiant moved away from New Geneva and headed toward the Void Hunter fleet. As they got closer, Morrison could see just how massive the creatures were. The smallest hunters were the size of battleships. The medium ones were as big as space stations, and the main creature was larger than anything Morrison had ever imagined. It's beautiful in a horrible way, Amanda said quietly. She was right. The creature's skin seemed to shimmer with its own light. Patterns of color moved across its surface like aurora lights. Long tentacles flowed behind it like hair in water. I'm reading massive bioelectrical activity, Amanda reported. The brain is definitely in the center of the body. Beginning approach, Tony said. His hands were steady on the controls, but Morrison could see sweat on his forehead. The smaller Void Hunters noticed them coming. Several began moving to intercept the Defiant. Incoming hunters, Carlos said. 3 of them. Evasive maneuvers, Morrison ordered. Tony spun the ship through space, dodging between the tentacles of the smaller creatures. The Defiant was fast, but the hunters were getting closer. There, Amanda pointed. The main creature's mouth. Morrison looked ahead and felt his courage waver. The mouth was a black opening surrounded by teeth the size of buildings. It looked like a tunnel into hell. "Tony, take us in." "Yes, sir." The Defiant shot toward the creature's mouth. Behind them, the smaller hunters were still chasing, but they stopped at the edge of the mouth. They wouldn't follow the human ship inside their master's body. The inside of the creature was unlike anything Morrison had ever seen. The walls pulsed with a heartbeat. Strange lights flickered in the darkness. The air was filled with a mist that made everything look like a dream. "Following the neural pathways toward the brain," Amanda said, her voice echoing strangely in the creature's body. They flew deeper into the monster. Sometimes the passage was wide enough for a dozen ships. Sometimes it was so narrow that Tony had to fly very carefully to avoid the walls. "There," Amanda said finally, "the brain chamber." Ahead of them was a huge open space. In the center floated a mass of tissue that pulsed with electrical energy. It was the creature's brain, the central mind that controlled the entire Void Hunter fleet. "Ryan, activate the beacon," Morrison ordered. "Beacon activated, sir." Broadcasting human thoughts. At maximum power. The effect was immediate. The brain began to pulse erratically. The creature's body shuddered around them. Through the communication system, they could hear the sounds of confusion from the Void Hunter fleet outside. "It's working," Beth said. "The hunters are losing coordination." But something was happening to the crew as well. Morrison felt dizzy. Dr. Sullivan gripped her chair as pain shot through her head. Amanda's readings became blurry as her vision wavered. "How much longer can we maintain this?" Morrison asked. Ryan's voice was weak. "Maybe 5 more minutes before we lose consciousness." Outside the creature, the Void Hunter fleet was in chaos. The smaller hunters were flying in random directions, no longer following orders from the main brain. Some were crashing into each other. Others were simply floating motionless in space. "The evacuation ships are getting away," Beth reported through her pain. "The hunters aren't chasing them anymore." Morrison felt a moment of victory. They had done it. They had saved New Geneva, but the victory was short-lived. The creature's brain was adapting to their signal. The chaotic pulsing was becoming more regular. The monster was learning to ignore the human thoughts. "It's adapting faster than we expected," Amanda said weakly. Morrison realized they had one chance left. "Ryan, can you overload the beacon? Send out so much signal that the brain can't adapt." Ryan's hands shook as he worked at his controls. "Yes, sir, but the feedback will probably knock us all unconscious." "Maybe worse." Morrison looked around at his crew. They were all in pain, but they were still fighting. These were humans, people who never gave up when others needed help. "Do it," Morrison said. Overloading the beacon now, Ryan said. The last thing Morrison remembered was a flash of light and the sound of the creature's brain screaming in frequencies that human ears couldn't hear. Then everything went dark. When he woke up, the Defiant was floating in empty space. Through the bridge windows, he could see the Void Hunter fleet scattered across the star system. The main creature was dark and motionless. Many of the smaller hunters had simply shut down. "Report," Morrison said weakly. "We're alive, sir," Dr. Sullivan said. "The beacon overload worked. The main creature's brain is dead. The fleet is broken." Morrison smiled as he looked toward New Geneva. The planet was still there, still green and blue. The evacuation ships were safe. 2 million people would live to see another day. They had done the impossible. One small human ship had defeated the terror of the galaxy. Captain Jake Morrison sat in his chair on the bridge of the Defiant and watched the rescue ships arrive. 3 days had passed since they destroyed the Void Hunter main creature. Word had spread across the galaxy faster than he had ever imagined. "Possible, sir," Beth Turner reported. We're receiving messages from over 200 different worlds. They all want to know how we defeated the Void Hunters. Morrison looked out at the broken Void Hunter fleet. Most of the smaller creatures had died when their main brain was destroyed. A few were still alive, but they floated in space like lost. Children. Without the central mind to guide them, they seemed harmless. "Any word from Galactic Command?" Morrison asked. "Yes, sir," Beth smiled. "Admiral Chun is coming personally to New Geneva. He should arrive in 6 hours." Dr. Kate Sullivan came onto the bridge. She looked tired but happy. "Captain, I have good news. All of our crew members have recovered from the neural feedback, and the Calith refugees we rescued are doing well. They want to thank you personally." Morrison nodded. "How are the people on New Geneva? Safe, sir?" The evacuation was successful. Over 1,900,000 people were rescued before the Void Hunters arrived. Morrison felt relief wash over him. His brother's family was among those rescued. The call he had received from his brother yesterday was the best conversation of his life. "Captain," Amanda Price called from her station, "I'm still studying the data from inside the creature. What we learned is incredible. Tell me." Amanda turned to face him. "The Void Hunters really were refugees, sir. Their entire species was running from something they called the Silence. From what I can understand, it destroyed their home galaxy millions of years ago." Morrison thought about this. "So they came here because they had nowhere else to go." "Yes, sir. But they were so afraid of the Silence that they decided to consume everything in their path to stay strong. They forgot how to live peacefully." Tony Garcia spoke up from the pilot station. "Does that mean there are more of them out there?" "Probably," Amanda said. "But without their main creature, they can't coordinate attacks. The individual groups will be much easier to deal with." Ryan Brooks came onto the bridge carrying a tablet. "Captain, I've been analyzing the beacon technology we used. I think we can build better versions. If other ships had these beacons, they could defend themselves against any remaining Void Hunters." Morrison smiled. "Good work, Ryan. Make sure you share that information with Galactic Command." Carlos Martinez looked up from his weapons station. "Sir, we're getting a priority signal from Earth. It's from the President herself." Morrison straightened his uniform. "Put her through." The main screen showed President Sarah Johnson sitting in her office on Earth. She looked proud and amazed. "Captain Morrison," she said, "the entire human race is proud of what you and your crew accomplished. You've shown the galaxy that humans can stand up to any threat." "Thank you, Madam President." Morrison replied, "We were just doing our job." President Johnson smiled. "Captain, your job has just changed. The Galactic Council has made a formal request. They want humanity to lead a joint task force to hunt down the remaining Void Hunter groups." Morrison felt surprised. "Lead the task force?" "That's right. Species across the galaxy are volunteering their ships to serve under human command. They want to learn how we defeated an enemy that no one else could stop." Morrison looked around at his crew. They seemed as shocked as he was. "Madam President," Morrison said, "we're honored, but we're just one ship with a small crew." "Not anymore. Captain, Fleet Command is promoting you to Admiral. The Defiant will be the flagship of a new fleet. You'll have ships from a dozen different species under your command." After the call ended, Morrison walked to the front of the bridge. Through the windows, he could see New Geneva in the distance. The planet looked peaceful and safe. "Admiral Morrison," Dr. Sullivan said, testing the new title. "It has a nice ring to it." Morrison laughed. "I'm still getting used to it." Danny Clark's voice came over the communication system from the planet's surface. "Captain, Admiral, the colonists down here want to throw a celebration in your honor. They're calling it Defiant Day. Tell them we're honored," Morrison replied. but remind them that we didn't do this alone. Every person who helped with the evacuation is a hero. Beth Turner was listening to her communication equipment. Sir, I'm receiving messages from species I've never heard of. They're all saying the same thing. They want to join the human fleet. Amanda was reading reports on her computer. Admiral, the effects of our victory are spreading everywhere. Void Hunter attacks have stopped in 17 different sectors. The remaining creatures seem to be running away. Morrison thought about what this meant. For millions of years, the Void Hunters had terrorized the galaxy. No one had been able to stop them. Species had lived in fear, never knowing when the monsters would come for their worlds. Now that was over. One small human ship had broken the ill. Terror that had lasted for eons. Sir, Ryan said, I've been thinking about why our plan worked. It wasn't just the beacon or our weapons. It was the way we think. Explain that, Morrison said. Most species in the galaxy make decisions as groups. They plan together, think together, act together. But humans are different. We can work as a team, but we can also think for ourselves. When the situation changed, we changed with it. Morrison nodded. The Void Hunters couldn't understand an enemy that was unpredictable. Exactly, Ryan said. They had fought thousands of species over millions of years, but they had never fought anyone like us. Carlos Martinez spoke up. So what made us special wasn't our technology or our weapons. It was our humanity. Morrison looked around at his crew, his friends. These people had been willing to fly into the mouth of a monster to save strangers. They had risked their lives without hesitation when others needed help. That's right, Morrison said. Humans don't give up. Humans don't abandon people in need. And humans are crazy enough to try impossible things. The bridge doors opened and the Caliph Refuse walked in. Their leader, an elderly female named Zira, approached Morrison. Admiral Morrison, she said. In careful English, my people wanted to thank you. You saved us when no one else would even try. Morrison stood up. We're glad we could help. What will your people do now? Zira smiled sadly. We will find a new world to call home. But we will never forget what humans did for us. The story of the Defiant will be told to Caliph children for 1,000 generations. As the Caliph refugees left, Morrison thought about the future. The Void Hunter threat was broken, but there would be other challenges. The galaxy was a dangerous place full of unknowns. But now the galaxy knew something new. It knew that when evil seemed unstoppable, when hope seemed lost, there was a species called humans who would stand up and fight. Admiral, Beth said, we're receiving the final casualty reports from the Void Hunter Wars. Over the past year, they destroyed 47 worlds and killed billions of people. Morrison felt the weight of those numbers. So many lives lost. So many worlds destroyed. But sir, Beth continued, I'm also receiving reports from across the galaxy. The remaining Void Hunter groups are surrendering or fleeing. Some are even asking for help. Without their central mind, many of them remember what it was like before. They became monsters. Morrison smiled. Maybe there was hope for peace after all. Set course for Earth, Morrison ordered. It's time to build that task force. As the Defiant flew toward humanity's home world, Morrison thought about a small ship and a small crew that had changed the galaxy forever. They had proven that size didn't matter. Technology didn't matter. What mattered was courage, determination, and the willingness to help others when they needed it most. The galaxy would remember the day the humans stood up to the darkness and won. And whenever new threats arose, people would remember that sometimes the smallest voice can make the biggest difference. The Defiant flew home through stars that were a little bit safer because humans had been brave enough to care.